My father could be regarded as a thoroughgoing gambler. He harbored the absurd fantasy of turning the tables overnight all day long, and ultimately dragged the entire family into the abyss of bankruptcy. My mother was extremely cowardly by nature. She simply dared not stop my father from going to the casino, just as when my father beat me, she could only cower aside and weep secretly. I had an elder sister who resolutely dropped out of school as soon as she graduated from junior high school, as if fleeing from a nightmare, and left this home impatiently. I was only 7 years old at that time. I cried and begged her, "Sister, can you take me with you?" But she just hurriedly covered my mouth and whispered, "Shh, be quiet." She left resolutely. When my father noticed, in order to vent his anger, he beat me severely. If it hadn't been for my mother's rare courage to stop him, I'm afraid I would have died as early as the age of 7. Perhaps dying at that time would have been the best relief for me, but fate played a cruel trick, and I still tenaciously survived. When I was 10 years old, my father met his end. He went out drunk, and was hit and killed by a car on the spot. Presumably, even heaven couldn't bear to see him continue to cause harm to the world, and took him away early. Less than a month after my father was buried, my mother also left quietly. While I was asleep, she stole away. The next morning, I cooked breakfast as usual and called her cheerfully, only to be shocked to find that her room was already empty and bitterly cold. At that time, I was only 10 years old, yet I pretended to be calm, and went to and from school as usual, full of anticipation that my mother would come back. However, until the family savings were exhausted by me, and I was starving and on the verge of death, she still never appeared. That was the first time I had the thought of death. I locked myself at home, and intended to starve myself to death. There was no food left at home, and I could only drink some water occasionally. The feeling of hunger was like a devil. My stomach twitched and ached and the pain made me want to vomit. When it was really unbearable, I could only drink more water to relieve it. At that time, I thought, maybe I should change the way of dying. Go to the top floor and jump off. Perhaps all the pain would end. But I had already lost all my strength to climb the stairs. Fortunately, when the landlord came to collect the rent, he found me who had fainted from hunger and managed to contact my sister. Thus, I escaped from the hands of death once again. My sister's life was also extremely difficult. She worked as a waitress in a restaurant during the day, and washed dishes at a late-night food stall at night. Even so, she still insisted on taking me with her. Although life was, at least we could fill our stomachs. She was determined to support my studies, firmly believing that only by studying could one make a name for oneself, and earn a lot of money. But she was completely unaware of how much discrimination and cold shoulder treatment poor children would suffer at school. The classmates in the class didn't like me from the very beginning. They isolated me, laughed at me for having no father or mother, disliked me for being dirty all day long, and said I had a strange smell. Until one thing became the fuse that completely dragged my school life into the abyss of a nightmare. At first, a boy in the class lost a pen that was said to be extremely expensive, and this matter caused a great stir. Perhaps the person who stole the pen was afraid, and actually secretly stuffed the pen into my school bag. Without a doubt, I was regarded as the thief. From then on, my school life was plunged into endless bullying. I really couldn't bear to worry my sister, so I kept it from her all the time. But the oppression of school bullying made me extremely miserable. One day, when passing by a cybercafe, I stopped for some strange reason. That day, instead of going to school, I took the meal money my sister gave me and walked into the cybercafe. From then on, it was out of control. I was pleasantly surprised to find that I had a unique talent for games. The cybercafe had a special mechanism. When a player got a pentakill, the broadcast would announce the record, and instantly the whole cybercafe would know. After several consecutive broadcasts, people gradually gathered around my computer. Throw the skills quickly. Wow, so awesome. Hey, this hand speed, little brother, help me get a few more stars. I'll give you 5 yuan. Help me play a couple of games too. I'll treat you to a meal. Only then did I realize that playing games could actually make money. In the cybercafe, I seemed to become a star pursued by everyone. Because my game name was Hamburger, they affectionately called me Brother Burger. When I helped them play a couple of games, some of them would give me drinks, some would treat me to a meal, and some would directly give me some pocket money. Later, the cybercafe owner carefully taught me and set a unified standard. How much to charge for getting a certain number of stars or reaching a certain rank. Slowly, everyone became familiar with the rules, and my income became more and more stable. At that time, online games were very popular. After my reputation spread, customers even took the initiative to recommend me to their friends. In this way, I formed my own hamburger boosting group. I was only 14 years old. It was an age when I should have secretly gone to an unlicensed cybercafe to surf the internet. But I was living a life with a monthly income of several thousand yuan, while my sister worked extremely hard for a whole month and barely earned 2,000 yuan. On one side was the boosting life in the cybercafe, where I was highly praised and had a generous income. On the other side was the school hell where I was bullied and in complete darkness. After weighing the two, I resolutely chose to drop out of school. I took the first sum of money I saved, bought an electric bike for my sister, and carefully prepared a sumptuous dinner, waiting for her to come home happily. At that time, I sat by the window, my eyes fixed tightly on the corner downstairs, full of anticipation for the appearance of that familiar figure. In my mind, I had already started to imagine how surprised she would be when she saw all this, and how proud she would be of me. However, reality was like a heavy hammer, hitting me hard. My sister came back. When I excitedly told her all this and looked at her expectantly, she suddenly flew into a rage, the biggest temper tantrum I had ever seen her have. Just like a balloon that had been pressed for a long time, it finally couldn't bear the burden and banged and exploded. Her emotions that had been suppressed for a long time also completely burst out at this moment. She broke down and cried, asking me why I dropped out of school without saying a word. She said that she had once been so eager to continue her studies, but for the sake of survival, she had to reluctantly give up her studies. She worked desperately and pinned her dreams on me, but I tore all of this to pieces right in front of her. In her eyes, what she had dreamed of I abandoned so easily. This was my ingratitude and my ignorant arrogance. Indeed, because I didn't want to worry her, I had never mentioned to her the tragic situation of my school life. Naturally, she had no way of knowing that my books were always maliciously wet. My desk was covered with all kinds of swear words, and the sundries that flew over from time to time would always accurately hit my head. And those classmates around who whispered and sneered at me regarded me as a complete clown. I didn't want to tell her these hardships, but I also couldn't bear the desolation of having my full-hearted expectation replaced by a basin of cold water. At the age of 14, in a fit of anger, I chose to run away from home. After that, I drifted around, determined to become a professional esports player. But reality dealt me a heavy blow. Several years of youth training made me deeply understand that there are always people better than you, and there is always a higher sky beyond the sky. My so-called talent, in front of those real geniuses, was just nourishment to make them stronger. I was merely a slightly more conspicuous stepping stone on the road to other success. I, who had been severely hit on the road of esports, fell into the abyss of despair and collapse. I even learned to smoke and drink, trying to numb my nerves with alcohol and cigarettes. When I finally gave up the dream of a professional esports career and wanted to find a new direction in life, I met someone, a woman who was enough to change my life. She was 5 years my senior, and our initial encounter occurred in a cybercafe. At that time, I was 18 years old, having suffered a crushing defeat on the esports path. To make a living, I resumed my former occupation. On an unremarkable afternoon, I was fully engrossed in fulfilling boosting orders. She, like a gentle zephyr, quietly took a seat beside me. Wow, you're incredibly amazing. Since I could recall, apart from my sister and mother, I had never been in such close proximity to a female. In an instant, every muscle in my body tensed up, and my fingers involuntarily slipped. The game character I was controlling on the computer screen instantly revealed a flaw, easily conceding the first blood. A faint sense of annoyance stealthily crept into my heart. Ah, dead. Instead of showing the slightest sign of retreat, she drew even nearer. I could even faintly catch a whiff of the delicate perfume emanating from her. Haha, little brother, could it be that you're nervous because I'm here? Her teasing laughter made me feel inexplicably anxious, yet my ears uncontrollably turned a faint shade of red. I feigned calmness and inquired coldly, "Who are you?" "Oh, I'm the newly substituting network administrator. Having heard the announcement that you achieved a pentakill, I was eager to see which handsome young man was so outstanding." As if we had known each other for ages, she gracefully crossed her fair legs, casually placed her arm on my shoulder, and with her fingers adorned with vivid red nail polish, gently pointed towards the computer screen. However, her gaze remained firmly fixed on me, her eyes curving into charming crescents. "Hey, little brother, the character has respawned." Her reminder jolted me back to my senses. The moment I grasped the mouse again, I clearly heard my heart pounding like a thunderous drum. "Little brother, I finish work at 11 p.m., and I've always lived alone." She suddenly whispered softly in my ear. Having struggled in society for these years, how could I fail to discern the implication in her words? My hands trembled involuntarily, and my Adam's apple bobbed subconsciously. After several consecutive operational blunders, I managed to stammer out, "I have no money." She was slightly taken aback, and then burst into hearty laughter. Fortunately, we were in a private booth. Otherwise, it was truly unimaginable what peculiar glances others might cast. She informed me that her name was Ren Jian, and she hailed from Chongqing. In the ensuing days, she would saunter over to my side from time to time, Since my financial situation had marginally improved, I increasingly valued the comfort of life. I always opted for a private booth in the cybercafe, and that booth even became my exclusive domain. I smoked only premium cigarettes and drank only mellow wines, leading a life where one person's contentment ensured the family's lack of concerns. Naturally, like other men with aspirations, I silently saved money, envisioning saving enough for a dowry to marry a wife in the future. Each time she came, she did nothing else. She simply sat quietly beside me, watching me play games, occasionally emitting a few soft giggles, and constantly murmuring in my ear, "Wow, you're so outstanding. Goodness, your hand speed." Initially, when complimented in such a manner, I would blush profusely and feel extremely bashful. However, as time wore on, I gradually began to relish her soft voice and the words of praise flowing from her lips. Just like that, a month slipped by unnoticeably, yet she suddenly ceased entering my booth. She still worked at the cybercafe. Each time I approached the front desk, she would greet me with a smile. "Oh, isn't this the great god little brother? Here to showcase your skills again today." Haha. But despite sitting right at the front desk, she never set foot in my exclusive booth again. At first, I surmised that she behaved this way because she had frequently left her post without permission previously and had been admonished by the boss. However, later, when I witnessed other network administrator girls in different shifts, often leaving the front desk to chat with customers, and no one intervening, I realized she was doing it deliberately. People are perhaps so strange. When she was murmuring in my ear, I didn't pay much heed. But once that familiar voice vanished, my heart began to flutter inexplicably. I constantly felt that the already not overly spacious booth now seemed extraordinarily empty and desolate. Finally, I couldn't restrain myself and took the initiative to approach her. Pretending to be nonchalant, while purchasing something, I casually inquired, "Do you play games? I can accompany you." There was a hint of something inscrutable in the way she looked at me. As she handed the items to me, she let out a soft snort and said with a touch of coquetry, "I don't have any money to give you." She was aware that my boosting business was gradually dwindling at that time, and that I had started to engage in the escort, playing industry. I scratched my head in embarrassment and said, "Play a few rounds free of charge." She hesitated for a moment and ultimately consented. However, once we started playing, I discovered that her gaming skills were truly unimpressive. Gradually, I became less inclined to play games with her. Yet, I truly couldn't bear to let her leave my side. Perhaps I had been alone and forlorn in the darkness for far too long. Having finally caught a glimpse of a colorful silhouette in the monochromatic world, I became greedy for this life filled with color. After much internal struggle and repeated deliberation, I finally summoned up the courage to speak. My home is not far away. Are you free after work? I have saved some money." This was the first time in my life that I uttered such words. I was so nervous that I didn't even dare to meet her gaze. I felt my heart pounding violently, as if it were on the verge of bursting through my chest. My face was burning hot, as if engulfed by a raging inferno, and even my temples were throbbing incessantly. In my mind, I had already started envisioning various scenarios of bringing her back to that small rental house if she agreed. However, just as I was immersed in my reverie, a resounding slap unexpectedly landed on my face. The pain surged instantaneously, jolting me awake from my fantasy. The look in her eyes was brimming with anger, and beneath that anger, there seemed to be a trace of grievance. You really take me for that kind of person? You scoundrel." Her eyes welled up with tears, and she turned around and fled. I was completely at a loss, having no idea how to deal with this sudden turn of events. In the subsequent days, the way she looked at me was perpetually tinged with resentment. I, who had scarcely engaged in positive interactions with people for a long time, was utterly at a loss in the face of such a situation. I scoured the internet for numerous strategies, and ultimately attempted to send her flowers and purchase desserts for her. Later on one occasion, I gritted my teeth and bought a rather renowned lipstick for her. Her perpetually tense face finally displayed a faint smile. "Just with these you expect to placate me?" She entered my booth, carrying a plate of melon seeds. I was too embarrassed to look directly at her, and could only stare fixedly at the computer screen, saying stiffly, "Then, what do you desire? Are you a virgin? Do I have to teach you how to charm a girl?" Her customary coquettish tone filled me with secret delight, for I believed she was on the verge of forgiving me. "Then are you free on the weekend? Let's go watch a movie together." "Movie? We're not a couple. Why should I accompany you to watch a movie?" I panicked instantly, and even my game, playing became absent-minded. "Sorry, then, I'll treat you to a meal." "So obtuse. I've hinted so explicitly. Can't you understand?" She suddenly grew angry again, and turned around to leave. Once more I was left alone in the booth. I sat there dumbfounded, completely failing to fathom where I had gone astray. Due to her words, I had no inclination to continue with the subsequent boosting orders, and left for home early. But lying in bed, her figure and her voice incessantly lingered in my mind, refusing to dissipate. Finally, I seemed to discern the profound meaning in her words. In an instant, an indescribable joy surged over me like a surging tide. The next day, I nervously attempted to invite her out for a meal. When she actually appeared before me, I became even more certain that my conjecture was correct. I was extremely ill at ease for a long while. After the meal, I still summoned up the courage to ask her to take a stroll by the river. When we reached the center of the bridge, She abruptly halted and said in a coquettish voice, "I'm so fatigued." I could only stop as well. By this time it was approaching dusk. The river beneath the bridge flowed gently, and the setting sun's afterglow poured down, gilding the river's surface with a brilliant sheen, as if a layer of gold dust had been sprinkled. We quietly gazed at the river scenery for a while. Finally, I mustered up all my courage. Can you be my girlfriend?" I was so nervous that I didn't dare to look at her, and could only anxiously await her response. Every minute of her silence made my heart rise higher. When my heart was in my throat, she finally let out a soft sigh and said, "But, I yearn for a stable life." My heart plummeted suddenly, and I stammered, "STA stable? What sort of, is considered stable?" She propped her chin in her hand, and pondered for a moment before saying, "Having wealth, having a stable job, a secure residence, and being able to provide me with a peaceful home." Money. Right, of course one needs money to marry a wife. "I will strive to earn money and definitely offer you a stable life," I declared firmly, with determination ablaze in my eyes. She simply gazed at me quietly, a faint smile playing on her lips, yet I was unable to decipher the hidden meaning in her smile, and could not fathom whether she was in agreement or not. I was extremely nervous and could only clumsily confirm with her once more. "Then, can you be my girlfriend on a trial basis? I'm confident I can offer you a stable life." She pouted, feigned thought for a moment, and then broke into a bright smile. "Well, I can't resist. Then let you be my trial boyfriend for a month." As a novice in love, I was completely ignorant of the nuances of love. Fortunately, she was like a solicitous teacher, patiently guiding me bit by bit. She expressed her dissatisfaction with the high rent of the house she was renting, so I hastily and enthusiastically invited her to my home. However, she deemed the room I rented to be too cramped. On that very day, I hastened to visit all the real estate agencies in the vicinity, and ultimately selected a 100 square meter house with a monthly rent of 2,000 yuan. She was overjoyed and would shower me with sweet nothings in my ear every day. "Ah, baby, you're so wonderful. You're the best man in the world. I'm so blissful." This was the first time in my life that someone relied on me so wholeheartedly. That 100 square meter rental house also became my long, desired warm haven. To afford her a better life, I became even more desperate, playing games day and night. Sometimes she would attentively accompany me, and at other times she would cajole me for a few hundred yuan to go have a late night snack on her own. But life always loves to play tricks. Whenever I thought my life was gradually getting on the right track, fate suddenly dealt me a heavy blow. The popularity of online games receded like a rapidly ebbing tide. No matter how strenuously I endeavored to do boosting or escort playing, the number of orders I could obtain was extremely scarce, and the price kept dropping. With the exorbitant rent and her daily expenses, my savings were gradually depleted. She also seemed to be aware of these circumstances, yet she still comforted and cajoled me as usual. "It's alright, baby. If we can't engage in this game-related work, we can pursue something else. We can still earn money. You're so remarkable. You can handle other jobs with ease too." Looking at her understanding demeanor, my heart ached even more. I spent half a year with her. During these 6 months, her coquetry and encouragement had me deeply infatuated. I loved her to the extent of being unable to extricate myself. Thus, when she pouted in disappointment because I couldn't afford the lipstick she fancied, but without uttering a single word of complaint, I was so heart-broken that I didn't know what to do. To save money, I resolutely quit smoking. Sometimes, when the cigarette craving became unbearable, I would pick up the previously smoked cigarette butts and put them in my mouth to barely satisfy my addiction. I no longer confined myself to just playing games, and started to attempt some proper jobs. I worked as a porter and a waiter. Eventually, I chose to give up gaming and entered a factory to work. However, after entering the factory, due to the busy work, it was inevitable that I would rarely have the chance to see her often. In the beginning, she would inquire about my well-being every day. But gradually, because I was too occupied with work and couldn't reply to her messages in a timely manner, her attitude towards me became increasingly indifferent. Until that day, the phone rang suddenly. Her sobbing voice came through the receiver, saying that her parents were urging her to return to her hometown, and she had no choice but to break up with me. At that moment my world spun, and I was completely stunned, filled with anxiety. After that, I frantically dialed her number, but no one ever answered. Only then did I wake up to the fact that she might really have left me. In that rental house with a monthly rent of 2,000 yuan, every corner retained her presence and memories. I broke down and wept, with tears streaming freely. When the factory workers learned of this, they took me out for a heavy drink, trying to drown my sorrows in alcohol. I couldn't let go, not because I resented her for leaving resolutely, but because I loathed my own incapability. Why couldn't I earn enough money to provide her with a stable life? I had made solemn promises before, yet in the end, I was still that poor fellow who found it hard to extricate himself from the quagmire of poverty. Recommended by the factory workers, I got in touch with mobile games. The convenient nature of mobile games quickly attracted me. After a day of arduous work, being able to team up with the guys for a gaming session was truly a form of relaxation. After playing for a while, I was pleasantly surprised to find that my gaming talent hadn't disappeared. As time went by, mobile games became increasingly popular in this fast-paced world. People who had been busy all day liked to pick up their phones to kill time in their spare moments. With my previous experience, I quickly embarked on the path of mobile game boosting this time. In the first year when the mobile game boosting industry hadn't fully emerged yet, I reaped substantial rewards relying on my own strength. In just 1 year, my income was nearly 200,000 yuan. After deducting daily expenses, I managed to save 150,000 yuan. However, good times didn't last long. More and more people flooded into this industry, and the competition grew increasingly fierce. I lacked competitive experience, and didn't know how to highlight my advantages in this highly competitive market. Gradually, I felt overwhelmed. I yearned to carve out a niche with my strength, to show my prowess by defeating 5 opponents single-handedly in the game. But in a 5-person team battle, the efforts of one person were ultimately no match for those closely knit teams. I also tried to find teammates, but the process wasn't smooth. Seeing others become live stream anchors, and gain a large number of fans, I followed suit. But because I was not good at speaking, the popularity in my live broadcast room was always meager, with the number of viewers always remaining a pitiful 2-digit figure. I tried my best to improve my game record and obtain more game emblems. Yet in this highly competitive market, I was gradually forgotten and left unnoticed. The intense sense of frustration plunged me into a deep state of confusion. Just then I met Fong Fong. Fong Fong was one of my clients. She always patronized my business, and often said that playing games was just for amusement, and she hoped to have someone to chat with. But I was tongue-tied and not very good at chatting. She always laughed and teased me for not knowing how to adapt to the market. I knew in my heart that she was right. I could keep delving into and perfecting my gaming skills, but I couldn't please others with my eloquence. Perhaps Fong Fong was really too bored. She persistently asked me to play with her without getting tired of it. Over time, we gradually became familiar with each other. Once, she even specially flew from afar to Guangzhou to see me. The moment I saw her, inferiority and timidity engulfed me like a tide. She was so radiant, sunny, and cheerful, exuding a charming glow all over. She was very tactful and joked that she came to Guangzhou for a trip, and dropped by to see me. I smiled shyly. Compared with her, who thrived freely in the sunshine, I, who was struggling hard in the darkness, seemed so small and insignificant. I didn't dare to approach her on my own initiative, but she always took the initiative to come closer to me. It was she who proposed to date me, so we had a short-lived relationship. Her family was well off and she didn't lack money. When I was with her, I didn't need to spend much on her. At first, we tried to overlook the gap in our social status. I tried my best to learn how to make her happy, and held her dear. She also gladly accepted my kindness, and would order me milk, tea takeout from time to time. Her kindness and gentleness made me feel flattered, but at the same time, they also intensified the timidity in my heart. I was well aware that I was not worthy of her. This fact was too glaring for me to deceive myself. I tried my utmost to make money, attempting to narrow the gap between us. But even the money I earned after a month of hard work might not be enough for her to have a few casual meals. She always said that I just needed to be with her, and didn't have to work so hard. She even said that she was willing to support me. When the guys knew about this, they all envied me for my good fortune. It seemed that everyone was optimistic about our relationship, except me. She was an impeccable good girl, and I really was completely unworthy of her. Eventually, we broke up amicably. She left very gracefully, and before leaving, she exhorted me not to be too tired, and to learn to love myself. Love myself? I stared at the empty room, and the box of instant noodles that had been soaked for a long time on the table. Whether I ate or not for 3 meals a day, no one cared. Once, when I was playing games until my body trembled, I suddenly realized that winter was approaching, and the weather had become very cold. Yet I was still wearing that yellowed white t-shirt. In this world, no one cared about my warmth, cold, or whether I was full. I seemed like a wandering soul in the world, unnoticed by anyone. Sometimes, when I was tired from playing games and stood by the window, looking at the numerous lights outside, the festive bustle, and the busy spring festival travel rush had nothing to do with me. Even if I wanted to travel, going alone seemed dull and uninteresting. Just when I was mired in this endless darkness, feeling that there was no hope of getting out, Ren Jian contacted me. The factory workers I had befriended before had gone to work in other provinces, and the opportunities to meet, drink, and chat had become fewer and fewer. Also, I was not good at maintaining relationships online. Gradually, our connections grew sparser, and in the end, I was left alone. While I was doing a boosting order, Ren Jian sent a message. "How have you been recently?" When I saw this message pop up, my hand involuntarily trembled. I knew I was so spineless. Within just 3 seconds after she sent the message, I somehow hung up the game and replied fine. She was still as talkative as before. After throwing out a topic, she started chatting non-stop. She shared her recent life with me, saying that she was doing well, and even sent me a video of her travels. At first, I thought she was showing off to me, but then she laughed heartily and said, "Come with me sometime. The lake here is extremely beautiful. You've been cooped up indoors all day. You should have come out to relax long ago." I had to admit that her words could still easily move me. Under her enthusiastic overtures, we resumed our previous online conversations. She tentatively asked, "Can I still call you baby? Aren't you still angry with me?" Then she explained, "My parents forced me back then. I had no choice. They took away my phone. Later, when I got my phone back, I was too embarrassed to contact you again." I knew in my heart that she was lying, but I was still unable to extricate myself as if I had drunk poison wine. My life was already in a terrible state. Even if her appearance had some ulterior motive, so what? People have feelings. I believed that as long as I tried hard enough, she would eventually stay for me. It was as if we had returned to the passionate love period. When she learned that I hadn't eaten, she would urgently urge me to go and eat. From then on, my 3-meal-a-day routine was no longer ignored. When the weather got hotter or colder, she would remind me in advance. And I also began to pay attention to the changes of the 4 seasons. During holidays, she would act coquettishly and ask me to take her traveling. To get train tickets, I often had to wait for a long time. In the end, I could only buy train tickets and make several transfers to go to the city where she was to accompany her. I finally experienced the congestion during the spring festival travel rush and holidays, and felt the earthly hustle and bustle. Because I had lost her once, I cherished everything now extremely. I knew that her purpose of being with me had always been the same. She had been honest about this when we first got together. She longed for a stable and happy life, and the only thing that could give her that was money. So I had to work even harder to make money. Baby, my friend recently went traveling in Harbin. Do you know about the ice sculptures in Harbin? They're really popular. I also want to go and see them. Sigh, but I don't have the money. She sighed with a gloomy look on her face during the video call. I understood what she meant, and without hesitation transferred 13,140 yuan to her. The moment she received the money, she became as happy as a child. She went to Harbin and sent me many beautiful photos. Looking at her bright smile in the photos, a warm feeling welled up in my heart, as if I were there myself. When she wanted to buy a bag, I fulfilled her wish without hesitation. When she wanted to go abroad to see the world, I also transferred money to her. Gradually, her address for me changed from baby to husband. Husband, I miss you so much. But we're so far apart. I really hate long-distance relationships. When she said this on the other end of the phone, my heart rate suddenly accelerated. I immediately bought a train ticket for the early morning, packed my few belongings, and rushed to the city where she was overnight. I carefully prepared 99 roses, her favorite, and knocked on her door full of anticipation. Standing at the door, I was so excited that I couldn't control myself. I wasn't sure if this surprise was for her or for me. Finally the door opened. I eagerly held the flowers in front of her. Honey, I've come to see you. My voice trembled with excitement, and my whole body was slightly shaking. On the other side of the flower bouquet, she was silent for a long time. I secretly glanced at her, and saw that her face was full of astonishment, and there were some emotions in her eyes that I couldn't understand. Why are you here? She quickly regained her smile, but this smile was different from what I had expected. I had thought she would excitedly rush into my arms, but she just smiled sweetly, took the flower bouquet, and stepped aside to let me in. Her rental house was quite spacious, but it was filled with clothes racks, gaman clothes bags, looking very crowded. I've decided to live with you so that I can be with you every day. I smiled and tried to hug her. After all, I was the one who paid for the rent of this house. I thought it was only reasonable for me to move in and live with her. However, the moment I hugged her, her body stiffened instantly. Her expression was a bit unnatural, and then she pouted worriedly and said, "But this house is so small and crowded. If you move in, I don't really like it." I was taken aback for a moment and quickly tried to coax her. "Then, I'll look for a bigger place, and we'll move there together." "Oh, you're not familiar with this place. You'd better go back. I've already returned the rental of my previous place." I paused for a moment and leaned my head on her shoulder. "I just want to spend more time with you. Usually, I'm so busy with boosting orders that I rarely have time to accompany you. You don't have to specifically accompany me. I can understand, but I really want to accompany you." We jangtrilla for a while, and then she suddenly asked, "Did you move in with me just for that kind of thing?" I was instantly stunned and immediately flustered. "How could that be?" I stammered. But. I felt tongue-tied, filled with grievance and helplessness. She, however, glared at me discontentedly. Her eyes were like those of a teacher interrogating a misbehaving student, full of scrutiny and suspicion. "Didn't you say you'd work hard to make money and marry me?" Her words were vehement, and her tone was saturated with grievance. "But you're not ready to marry me at all right now, yet you're eager for an intimate relationship with me? What if I get pregnant by accident? What would we do then? And then you'd get tired of me and abandon me." The more she spoke, the sadder she became, and tears welled up in her eyes. This situation left me completely at a loss. I was extremely anxious and tried to comfort her and make her happy. But no matter how hard I tried, her emotions remained difficult to soothe. A sense of guilt spread through my heart like a tide. I had always yearned to marry her, and this was the powerful driving force that made me work day and night to earn money. However, when she poured out her dissatisfaction with the long-distance relationship, I was so worried that I just wanted to rush to her side immediately and be with her all the time. I never expected such a misunderstanding to occur. I was filled with remorse, knowing that I had made a terribly wrong assumption. I was still thinking that when your financial situation stabilizes a bit more, we'd get married in the second half of the year. I've even told my parents about it. She sobbed as she spoke, and I caught the crucial information in her words. Getting married in the second half of the year. Goodness, at that moment, joy surged like a violent tide, almost drowning me completely. I felt as if I were in a dream. Even though we weren't officially married yet, she knew that as long as she made a request, I simply couldn't refuse. Helplessly, I had to find a small one-bedroom apartment nearby. Recently, I joined a club that specifically undertakes boosting business, and my income has gradually become a bit more stable. Since she mentioned getting married in the second half of the year last time, in the following days, she talked about marriage more and more frequently. I pondered that after getting married, we would definitely have to consider having a child. The money for the child's milk powder, diapers. Alas, money was needed everywhere. Right. How about we open a store together? With a store, we'll have a stable income in the future. I obediently followed her ideas, accompanied her to look for a suitable storefront everywhere, and carefully selected furniture. Look at this video. People say giving birth is extremely painful. Goodness, and you'll turn into a haggard woman. No, before that dreadful day comes, I have to enjoy my youth. I want to travel. She fantasized excitedly. Naturally, without a word, I immediately transferred money to her, allowing her to travel to her heart's content. She seemed to be fully immersed in the preparations for the wedding. The affectionate calls of husband made me ecstatic, and I sank deeper and deeper into this tender trap. As a man, who could resist the coquetry of the woman he loved deeply? Moreover, we were about to get married, and she was about to become my wife completely. Just imagining the happy life in the future made me so excited that I often couldn't sleep all night. I felt like a husband who worked hard outside, striving to make money wholeheartedly, just to let his wife enjoy life at ease and bloom with beauty. People always say that loving someone is like nurturing a flower. I loved her, so I was willing to give everything just to make her smile. During a break in doing boosting orders, I suddenly realized that since I was going to get married, I should also start making some preparations. At least I had to tell my sister this good news. In fact, after I ran away from home, my sister had found me through the police station. But seeing that I was determined to leave, she was angry and no longer interfered much in my life. Later, my sister got married and formed her own family, and our contact became increasingly scarce. Now that I was about to get married, my sister Li Ying knew about this. But I never expected that just by sending a message saying that I was going to get married at the end of the year, my sister immediately called. We couldn't remember how long it had been since we last talked on the phone. On the other end of the line, she bombarded me with questions about the woman, such as who she was, what her name was, how we met, and what her family did. She was like someone checking household registration. I was a bit impatient and blurted out, "You didn't tell me about your partner when you got married either." As soon as I said this, she was left speechless. After that, she kept sending me various preparations before marriage, such as the style of the wedding invitation, the style of the wedding dress, and the strategy for taking wedding photos. A bunch of photos and videos were shared with me all at once. Jutsa, the matter of getting married gradually took on a clear and specific form in my mind. When it came to November, my sister suddenly asked me, "Why haven't you set the wedding date yet? Didn't you say you were getting married at the end of the year?" Hearing this, my heart suddenly fluttered with panic and some inexplicable annoyance. In fact, I had also asked Ren Jian this question. I had carefully inquired whether we should determine the wedding date, but she was either enjoying a beauty treatment in a beauty salon or traveling abroad. Every time she replied nonchalantly, "Oh, wait until I'm done with this. Husband, I'm definitely yours. Are you still afraid I'll run away?" I could only smile bitterly and have nothing to say. I knew in my heart that I still hadn't really tied her down firmly, but I had no way to change it. I could only desperately make money, desperately cut down on my living costs, and take orders day and night. Sometimes playing games for a long time with high intensity made me vomit uncontrollably when I got up in the middle of the night, and my stomach ached jen. At that moment, a strong urge to cry welled up in my heart. However, I still held back my tears. After all, a real man doesn't cry easily. When she woke up, I just complained with a bit of grievance. "You haven't cared about me for a long time." But I never dreamed that this simple complaint of grievance would instantly ignite her anger. "Care? How else do you want me to care about you? You're either urging me to get married all day long, or asking me when I'm going home. You're like checking up on me every day. None of my friends' partners are like you. Can you give me some personal space and let me have some privacy?" Privacy? When had I ever invaded her privacy? The pressure that had been building up in my heart for a long time finally erupted completely at this moment. I couldn't hold back anymore and had a big fight with her. I admitted that I was really exhausted. Thinking carefully, how many years had it been since I could have a hearty meal? To save money, I quit smoking and drinking and gave up all my hobbies. The only thing left in my mind was how to make money desperately. To make money, I could forget to eat and sleep and work continuously regardless of my health. She went to admire the ice sculptures, taste delicious barbecue, experience the exotic customs, and enjoy steaks, curry, and sumptuous buffets every day. Didn't I want to do the same? But I had to make money. It seemed that I was born bound by the fate of poverty, but my love for her had already penetrated deep into my bones and was incurable. So, I was willing to give everything to let her see the wonderful world instead of me, and enjoy the beauty of life to the fullest. Because in my heart, she was my wife, and I was her husband. I Li Ying give her happiness. However, she suddenly said, "Let's break up. I don't think we're suitable." When I saw this sentence, my heart instantly plummeted into an ice cave, and I was extremely flustered. I could only humbly beg for her forgiveness. "I'm just too tired. I'm so eager to marry you. Don't be angry. Didn't you say you wanted to go to Japan last time? I'll work harder and earn more money. How much money do you have left? You only know how to play games. But now playing games can't make money at all. When no one asks you to do boosting orders in the future, what else can you do? Go wash dishes in a restaurant? You can't do anything well. Can't do anything well? Yes, looking back on my life, I just longed to have a warm home, longing for Ren Jian to always be by my side and build a home with me. I was busy and stumbled along the way. I carefully recorded every detail of the wedding in a notebook. The wedding process had been rehearsed countless times in my mind, even in my dreams. I had naively thought that I could finally marry her as I wished. I had thought, but she was determined to leave. I understood everything she said. From the very beginning, I was clear about her purpose. She always said that the store was still under renovation, so the wedding had to be postponed. Then she said that her parents were not feeling well, so the wedding had to be postponed again. And she also said that she wanted to save more money, so the wedding still had to be postponed. In fact, I should have understood all this long ago, but I always had a glimmer of hope, thinking that even though she postponed it time and time again, there would always be a time when she would stop. I naively thought that she would see how hard I was trying to get close to her, and would eventually be touched by my sincerity and fall in love with me. But now, she had belittled me to nothing and said that I was a useless person. All my savings were in a bank card. This card was originally used to deposit a certain amount of money every month. It was the money I carefully saved for marrying a wife. Later, I simply put all my money into this card. When she asked for money, I directly transferred it to her from this card. She also had a secondary card, and could withdraw money at will. I had never carefully calculated how much money I had given her. I only knew that now, all my wealth was left with more than 10,000 yuan. I spent more than 600 yuan, and took a plane for the first time in my life. Usually for this journey, I would take a hard-seat train for 8 or 9 hours. I never expected that it only took 2 hours to arrive at the destination comfortably by plane. Usually I either took the bus or walked. This time, I also indulged myself a bit, and chose to take a taxi. At this time, Fong Fong's voice suddenly rang in my mind. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself? Yes, perhaps it was time to enjoy myself a bit. I went to eat the hamburgers I had always wanted to eat. I originally planned to go for a barbecue, but after eating 3 hamburgers, I found that I was already full and satisfied, so there was no need for the barbecue. At this moment, I actually felt an unprecedented sense of relief in my heart. I came to the cybercafe where my dream had once started. Unfortunately, it had already been demolished and now there was a milk tea shop. I then went to the cybercafe where I met Ren Jian. This cybercafe was still there, but the business was much worse than before. I entered the booth where I used to stay the most, and logged into my game account that I hadn't logged in for a long time. I chose the hero who had accompanied me through countless days and nights, and experienced countless intense battles. Looking at his familiar appearance movement, and listening to the familiar lines, my eyes suddenly welled up with tears, and I murmured softly, "Old friend, long time no see." Finally, I opened the mobile game and played the last game. At this time, I felt as if I had relived my entire life. I took a taxi to the riverside. When getting off, the driver smiled and asked me, "Why did you come to the riverside to see the river view, so early in the morning? Are you here to wait for the sunrise?" I smiled and didn't know how to answer. The sunrise? I walked slowly along the riverside. There was a thin mist over the river surface, and everything was shrouded in a hazy atmosphere. Unconsciously, I came to the bridge where Ren Jian and I had confessed our love, and looked towards the place where the river and the sky met in the distance. At this time, the driver's words rang in my ears again. Was I really waiting for the sunrise? I transferred all the remaining money, 14,848 yuan, to Ren Jian, and specifically marked it as a voluntary gift. On the cross, river bridge in the early morning, there were few vehicles. I held my mobile phone tightly, feeling at a loss, not knowing what I was actually waiting for. But deep in my heart, in fact, I vaguely guessed what I was waiting for. Once, a hand had pulled me out of the lonely and dark abyss. I had thought that was the salvation of fate, but now, I was still waiting for that hand to appear again. Beep, a message popped up on the mobile phone. I trembled all over, only to find that it was just a calendar reminder that today was my birthday. Ah, was today my birthday? I was stunned for a moment, and involuntarily opened the chat box with her. I hesitated for a long time and finally typed the word, morning, and sent it. A conspicuous red exclamation mark appeared immediately. At that moment, I felt as if my whole body had fallen into an ice cave, with a bone-chilling cold. Waiting for the sunrise. How could someone like me possibly wait for the sunrise? I slowly climbed over the bridge railing. In this instant, the distance between life and death seemed so close and so simple. The river water in the early morning was icy cold. The moment I fell, the river water, like the huge mouth of an abyss, instantly surrounded me, gradually swallowing my body temperature, and also swallowing my breath. It was painful, but it didn't seem so unbearable. I slowly closed my eyes, feeling a sense of relief that I had never felt before. Heaven, if you really have eyes in the next life, please don't let me come to this world again.